a little bit about Brunton, uh,
Yeah.
and would it be helpful for you if we just discussed him with you? So we asked you questions and made suggestions, and you told us, about him. Would that be all right for you?
Um, yeah, seems to be that people seem to be joining the
Because I think we're very interested in him, and we just want to hear you talking about him. Uh, and you know more about him than anybody else does because you've written this book. So it's a great opportunity for us to find out about him. So if we could just talk to you about him and ask you questions and say things, and you respond to that, would that be all right?
yeah, you could do. It's disappointing that I can't seem to resolve this problem with the issue with the sound. Um,
Yeah.
but there you are.
Okay, well, let's.
I don't.
Okay. So
I,
where was Brunton born?
right, he was born in northeast of Scotland. His father, Brunton, came from a family of, well, way back. His grandfather, great grandfather, was actor manager. He was the kind of theatrical family of the day, and his. If you go around a number of various museums, or certainly UK, you'll find probably a reproduction, print of one of his daughters, one of his sons. They were quite a famous family, the Brunton family, and he worked at Drury Lane in London, and he also was the actor manager of the what was leading theatrical circuit at that time in the late 18th century of circuit, and that was in East Anglia in the UK,
Hmm.
and they were based in Norwich, and um, so some of his children, as I said, went on the stage, but his father didn't. His father um, was went into naval service. This was a time when the Napoleonic Wars, and he rose from the ranks, as it were, um, to become a midshipman, or was about to become a midshipman. That was in 1815, at the end of the Napoleonic Wars. Of course, there was a surplus number of sailors as a result of the ending of the war. So his father left the Royal Navy and for years, for some time, was out of work. And then he joined the Coast Guard, which was expanding at that time. And he first of all, he was at sea um, in a Coast Guard cutter, and then he got transferred to land. He wanted to start a family eventually, and it was a more settled existence. He could get a shore base, and within a short time, he was obviously a man of some promise because he got quite a good. He not only transferred to land and was at a Coast Guard station, but he got promotion to another Coast Guard station, a more important one, where he was promoted to lieutenant or the head of the station, and his um, father was. As a result, he could start a family. Anyway, I've jumped a bit through the slides. You asked me a question about Brunton. Can you hear it now?
We can hear you very well. So who
But can
was?
you hear this? What?
No, we can't. We can't. So we can't hear it. So can you just talk to us? So maybe talk about Thomas Tredgold. Who was Thomas Tredgold? He was an engineer, was he?
He was an engineer, but he drew up a charter. The Institution of Civil Engineering was established about that time in the early 19th century, where he um, drew up a definition of civil engineering, which
Can I,
was
sorry, Geoff, can I read from your preface? Thomas Tredgold in 1828 was asked to define civil engineering for the Institution of Civil Engineers. He wrote, "It is the art of directing the great sources of power in nature for the use and convenience of man, etc. The most important object is to improve the means of production and of traffic in states, both for external and internal trades." Yes?
yes, that's right.
Yeah. I've got your
Um,
Kindle. That's the reason
but
I've got the book. I've got your book as a Kindle, so I'm just reading from that.
oh, I see.
Hmm.
Yes, he defined civil engineering. He was the first person to draw up the definition, a good definition of civil engineering. And after that, the institute flourished, bearing in mind his theories. Um, um, and there I give an illustration of various, structures and.
Yeah, could you explain the photographs here on this slide that you're showing us?
Yes, sure. The first one on top right. Well, you can see the top schedule. The first one on top right is um, civil engineers at the time, the students. Basically, there were people that were pioneers in their own way, and um, they were they acted as they were apprenticed to a practicing civil engineer, and they learned their profession by being articled to this engineer, and there wasn't any formal training as such, as there is or was and still is on the continent and subsequently in Japan, in fact, where they went for a course. These people were trained on the job, a bit like lawyers in the UK as well. And they was a tremendous expansion of, especially railway projects in the 19th century, and this was an explosion of their, need for their skills in terms of building civil engineering project and building railways and various artifacts of that nature.
Okay.
And that was this learning on a job was something that Brunton, in fact, uh, felt benefit from, and he was charged with those who thought there should be a training um, process instead. Um, he enabled, he was able to, he thought that this is various notable civil engineers of the time, and what what he thought of was the um, was the
Sorry, Geoff, could we go back to the previous slide? I wanted to ask you if that was Stephenson's rocket at the bottom of the page.
what do you mean that?
No, the one before this one. Yeah, is
No,
that
it wasn't.
Stephenson's
No,
rocket?
no, that's subsequent Stephenson rocket. I don't know what the engine was, but it was certainly after Stephenson rocket.
Okay,
Stephenson rocket is much more primitive
right.
contraption. That was probably an engine from the 1840s, 50s.
Right. And you seem to have a
So,
viaduct there as well.
Yeah, that's right.
so how did Brunton get into civil engineering?
But
Perhaps you better repeat the question, Robert.
How did Brunton get into civil engineering? I think you said
he was articled. He was articled to a civil engineer
right.
in Perth, in central Scotland. I don't know the circumstance of why he was articled as a particular engineer, but his father was very keen for him to become a civil engineer, and he uh, he ended up in Perth. And then the engineering question wanted to emigrate, get married and emigrate. And so he finished his articles in Aberdeen to the and this was this was the engineer to the local railway company that was working at that time, North of Scotland, a railway company. And he worked there for a number of years, for about 4 years, 4 or 5 years, finished his articles, became an assistant engineer, and then decided he wanted to go down to London. And as a result, he went down there and was very engaged in various civil engineering projects down there, railway in civil engineering projects. He learned a lot about not only engineering in the course of his early career and also his apprenticeship, but he also learned the importance of dealing with people and forming a team from a wide range of personage who were not only just involved as who were some of whom were unskilled and some were skilled. And so he was one of the projects he was involved in was sorry. Well, one of the projects he involved in when he came down to London Southeast was the construction of the Kew Railway Bridge, which some of you might know of because it's quite
It's still
near
there.
the actual National Archives, and still used today, in fact,
Yeah.
although the structure has been obviously been strengthened.
How did he,
Yeah, sorry.
sorry, how did he get to Japan?
Ah, that's what I was coming on to.
Right.
Um, his original thought was working overseas because the British Empire was quite expansive in those days. And he tried to get a job in India and irrigation project, but he was just too young and inexperienced to head up the project which he'd applied for. At that time, he heard that the Board of Trade was well. In fact, if you go to a take a wider picture, you'll know that Parks, the head of a British legation in Japan, very keen on furthering British trade in Japan. But the problem was that it was a very rugged. Well, I don't need to tell you or some of you anyway that it's a very rugged coastline in Japan, volcanic and very steep cliffs, and navigation there was very treacherous, and therefore to overcome this to some extent, volcanic as well, sorry, and as well was treacherous, and overcome this. Um, Parks insisted that the Japanese provide safe navigation partner navigation, of course, was, well, naturally enough, was lighthouses. And this is why they applied pressure on the Japanese government when trade negotiations were occurring. They should provide for basic range of lighthouses around the coast, leading to the main trading areas, ports, which were, Yokohama, basically. And that required, and also in the Inland Sea, if they wanted to go to Kobe. This is why this project on the Japanese authorities dealt with the Board of Trade to recruit a small team of engineers to go out to Japan. And they were not just they weren't to be not just engineers for the lighthouses to help build the lighthouses, but also because they were the only qualified civil engineers at that time, Japan. And they would undertake basically town planning work in Yokohama, which was the main trading port for Japan. And this is
So, Geoff, the board of trade wrote to Trinity House.
They both wrote to, well, no, they wrote to the Board of Trade, approached Trinity House because it's rather complicated, but there's the main lighthouse authorities for the UK is Trinity House, which was established in the 16th century, in fact, originally. And but there were also lighthouse authorities for Scotland and for Ireland, which dealt with their lighthouse in those areas.
Right, but they admitted they knew nothing about Japan, didn't they?
Well, they didn't know anything about Japan. They have obviously very few people have been to Japan, and they weren't. But the most similar physical landscape to Japan was in fact in Scotland. And, in the sense that it was a rugged, very rugged, turbulent area, seascape. And they weren't needed and they chose the Stephensons, who were the chief engineers for and had been for a number of years, and subsequently, in fact, were chief engineers for the Northern Lighthouse Board, which was the Lighthouse Authority for Scotland. And therefore Stevenson had never been to Japan either, themselves, in fact. But they thought it was the most similar sort of environment. And
so sorry to interrupt.
So they weren't lighthouse. There were no lighthouse engineers. I mean, the Stevensons themselves were engineers, but there wasn't a body of lighthouse engineers available in the UK who were building lighthouses, and so the choice of people was good, a bit limited. Although there had been, of course, people involved in engineering projects, especially across the British Empire at that stage, but very few were involved in lighthouse construction. So this is how Brunton wasn't, in fact, the first choice for the. They said some people have said that it was a stitch-up. In fact, it wasn't. In the sense that Brunton wasn't the first choice, but he was the second choice. And he went out to Edinburgh and was interviewed by the Stevenson, and they were impressed by his engineering background and his ability to lead a team of people. After he was appointed, two other assistant engineers were also approved to join him. So it was a team of three that went out to Japan, and they made a long journey because when they first went out to Japan, the Suez Canal hadn't been completed, and so it was even longer journey than normally.
What year did
And
they go? What year did he
but
arrive?
that was 1868.
Okay.
Well, 67, 68 was 68 was the year that they went out to Japan, and they arrived in Yokohama then. And they were mainly initially involved in town planning projects. I've got, yeah.
So did he know anything
There
about
had been a
building light?
fire in 1868, 3 years previously in 1865. A large area had been destroyed. A large area of Yokohama was destroyed, and nothing had been really done. So Brunton set about surveying and his team, set about surveying the settlement. And as you can see from the illustrations, in a pretty dire state anyway. But the what he was involved in doing was not only surveying, but also in terms of improving sanitation, drainage, and sewage, a proper sewage system. And as the bottom left-hand side, you can see a picture of the roadworks that he constructed. And it was a real, it's quite an effort.
So this is why his bust is in Yokohama, isn't it? Right? I
Well,
think.
you're going ahead of me in the
Sorry.
sense that first of all he was to set up a headquarters for the lighthouse service, which he did do in Yokohama, where he was staying anyway, in Benton, in Yokohama, and this is where you'll see a picture later on in the presentation of the actual complex. But he basically based there from the beginning. And well, it was the main European settlement in Japan, in a sense of being a trading post point for the
Did he know anything
well,
about
sorry.
did he know anything about building lighthouses before he went? Did he
No, yes,
expect
he did, in a sense that Stevenson had put together a training course on lighthouses, and they'd visited lighthouses. They'd undertaken studies of what lighthouses had been structured in Scotland, and so he did know. He was aware of the basic need
but
to provide.
he hadn't actually constructed a
Actually built.
lighthouse
He hadn't
himself.
actually built a lighthouse in
So it's
the UK.
amazing his achievement, phenomenal achievement, from the basis of no experience, knowledge but not experience.
Yes, yeah.
Hmm.
Basically, that was the
Okay.
situation where he hadn't built the lighthouses, and they hadn't been. The lighthouses that existed in Japan at that time were basically beacons, weren't proper lighthouses. There hadn't been any. There'd been a move to institute a network or to start on the construction of lighthouses. There'd been certainly in Nagasaki, there had been there'd been a ship had gone down, and if there was a feeling that if there was a lighthouse there, they would have saved the vessel, and I hate to say this, but in fact it was at the instigation of local Lloyd's agent, a gentleman who you probably know in other respects, quite well known, in Thomas Glover. And he was in the Lloyd's agent. He pressed the Board of Trade also. There should be a network of lighthouses. This was quite apart from what Parkes was doing for the wider area of Japan. And so there was a lighthouse that was constructed not by him, but by another gentleman by the name of Waters, constructed in just outside Nagasaki to guide ships into from the sea, the wider area into the. But it was a kind of fragile structure. Wasn't a proper lighthouse. Was a lighthouse, but it wasn't very well built, shall we say? And that was the first lighthouses in Japan. He hadn't built a lighthouse himself before he went out, but the plans were there. Stevenson, I mean, I haven't been able to discover to what extent the lighthouses. Well, I think on the spot, Brunton supplied information. There'd been various surveys of the areas where they wanted lighthouse, and he had obviously fed information back to the Stevensons, and Stevenson drew up the plans, as it were, for the lighthouses to some extent. Therefore, although I think they largely were built according to the needs of the surrounding situation, which supplied by Brunton.
Geoff, sorry, I have two questions, if I may. One, could you perhaps talk about Brunton's relationship with the difficult and awkward Sir Harry Parkes? And another is, do you have any slides of lighthouses for which he was responsible in Japan?
Yes, all the lighthouses he was responsible for. 26 lighthouses he built. 26. He was there from 1868 to 1876, and he laid down he built 26, including the ones. 2 or 3 of them, I think, were still being built when he left. But I mean, fundamentally, he produced the 26 out and his children, as they could sometimes called. They are all.
Do you have any slides of them? His children?
Yes, I do. Yeah, some.
Perhaps we could have a look at those.
Well, we'll need to.
I think we haven't got that much time left, I think. So
Exactly.
if we could focus on his great achievement.
That is somebody asked me about the complexly set up in Benton, the lighthouse headquarters, and that is the size of the dimensions of the place, including a lighthouse where people could train on the students.
That might be Ben 10, I don't
And
know.
that's one of the lighthouses that he did.
Right.
If you can see, and this is the on the left-hand side, the famous illustration from the Illustrated London News. It shows the various lighthouses involved, and there's two others that he's.
I think Hesaki, the one you just showed, is in Kee-tah-kew-shoo from memory. I think it's over in Moji Ward. I discovered it by chance one day.
Yeah. So there, he was also involved in of course, in drawing up regulations and instructions for the lighthouse keepers and um, uh, the assistant lighthouse keepers and the people that are involved in the lighthouse institution. Mostly these were variations of the regulations for the Scottish Northern Lighthouse Board. But it was important because it was quite a vast undertaking, and he had tremendous problems with some of the lighthouse keepers, especially the junior ones who weren't really being trained obviously at a distance. It was difficult. There was various inspections, regular inspection of the lighthouses, but when they weren't there, they were very much left up to their own. So therefore, he produced these various regulations and instructions for the lighthouse keepers.
I think I recall from Sir Hugh Cortazzi's book on Brunton that he was an abrasive character. Is that
But
right? He was,
no, it wasn't actually. He's got a very bad press in that sense. He was, it was a Brown, who was who was very much, he was originally well, he'd come from the P&O and he'd been recruited by Brunton to look after to be the captain of the tender for the lighthouse service. And he'd inveigled his way into a very strong relationship with the Japanese politicians at the time. And well, maybe, I mean, I don't think you have to realize, appreciate that he was a change agent, that Brunton was a change agent. Very difficult. The Japanese, some of the civil servants they had to deal with were very much on the make.
yeah,
And they were proving, there was corruption, and therefore he had to keep these people, had to negotiate with these people. And Brown was gave one instance of he said he had a very gruff manner, but maybe he was on occasion gruff. I don't know, but I think that generally he was quite a caring person, quite a person who negotiate. Very difficult to negotiate between
yeah.
the
Because I think
two. Yeah.
Hugh Cortazzi, his argument was that Brunton needed to be quite tough because the phenomenal obstacles he had in front of him, and that he needed to be a slightly nasty on occasions to get the thing done.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, he was a change agent. Therefore, to get anything done, you had to negotiate with people, and he got on very well with with Ito, bombing. The senior Japanese political figures gone very, very well with them, but they didn't. With some of the lesser middlemen, as it were, he was quite he could see through them, and they were they weren't they didn't want to change, or they wanted change, but change would benefit them rather than from
So
anything.
he had several audiences with Informasia, I think, didn't he?
No, just one. He
Or did
only
he?
had one.
But
He
he
only had one.
was he
But
given?
he in 1874, I suppose, the emperor visited the lighthouse headquarters. He showed him round to go with the head of the lighthouse service, the Japanese head of the lighthouse service. So he did meet him again at least once at a time. One at a time, but he wasn't. He didn't. He didn't see the emperor as frequently as you might suggest, as you would suggest. But
So but he was
so
phenomenally well
basically,
connected.
Basically, they couldn't afford him. I mean, in the sense that they brought his experts in. This was true not just of Brunton, but most of the other foreign experts they brought in. These people were paid amazing salaries, but they couldn't afford to pay for them for a number of years. And although Brunton was quite keen on seeing a developed transport network, he's very, very keen on. I don't know if I've got a picture. But I don't know where it is. He was quite keen on Japanese, and Pop was, for that matter, was on establish a rail network across Japan, and making a first stab at the Tokyo or Edo Yokohama link initially, but it wasn't a very good, very well developed project. It wasn't properly. I can go into it a bit more, but basically, it took a very long time for it to be established, and Brunton was quite keen on seeing an integrated transport system, whereby a very good road network could be developed, and river transport could also be regulated. But Japanese government was so keen at that time on doing that. They were concerned about insurrection. They were concerned about Western countries still, invading Japan. They wanted, the main thing was to establish a rail network, so they could move troops about from one part of the country to the other. And so it would have kept Brunton in Japan for a longer period, but if he's given a wider responsibility to establish proper road network, and I mean, in Yokohama itself, the harbour wasn't, again, Brunton was very keen on seeing the harbour developed so they could get more trade in and develop an economy developed. Again, it wasn't So as a result, it wasn't carried out. And as a result, he left in 1876 after, he'd been there since 1868. And a year after that, he was away in the UK on leave, and there was the big embassy, the great embassy, had also was touring around the country. He was helping them when they arrived in the UK.
So is that why he left when he did?
Pardon?
Did he accompany the embassy to the UK?
Yeah. Oh, yes, he did. Well, he was on home leave, as I said, but he was also asked by the Japanese authorities if he could help them when they visited the UK. So he went around with some of the delegation to various plants and factories and accompanied them and acted as a go-between, as it were. But so
Why did he leave Japan when he did?
his contract came to an end. His contract had already been renewed once, and there wasn't the work for him. He did various proposals to in terms of road network, in terms of the harbour. The other thing he was very keen on, and which he was responsible for a time, was the development of the telegraphic service between. Initially, it came on from Yokohama to Tokyo. The telegraph line was very popular, very well received by the populace. And then it was taken away from him, and it developed in to other centres, to Osaka, for example. But there was a whole problem with that was that there was ground roots opposition for the expansion of telegraph. By the some of the local population. They said that I think virgin's blood had been smeared on the wires, and they put the gantries for the wires right in the middle of the road, for example, and there were a whole lot of problems. Eventually, there was a link up to Osaka, but as I said, the initial line from Yokohama to Tokyo was the engineer and who was responsible for the line, and the shop administration was Brunton's. So that was another thing the team was involved in. Yes, it wasn't a job, but there wasn't a work for him after 1876. So they had to leave. The costs, even the lighthouse service, they reduced the initiative so that his assistant became the chief engineer and had reduced salary, and there wasn't the same investment by the Japanese government. But the lighthouses expansion still went on, and eventually the Japanese themselves took over the management of the service. There weren't any. There was, his assistant was the immediate pick, but he lasted about 4 years, and then the Japanese themselves were the administrators became the administrators for the lighthouse service. The lighthouses, the range of lighthouses expanded accordingly, but not at the same pace. The initial expansion was quite dramatic under Brunton, but afterwards, he was quite an innovator as well. He was a great believer in the use of concrete. I know it sounds extraordinary, but in fact, it was quite a new development in the 19th century. And he dressed, for example, the initial, some of the initial houses were he provided a coating of concrete, which was provided waterproofing to the stones of which he built the lighthouses. Although some of the lighthouses were built of wood, and some were brick lighthouses. It's really according to the accessing the nearby, there were sources nearby, or was more,
Geoff,
what was more accessible.
Geoff, just a second. On your screen, do you see a PC cleaner screen?
Oh, yeah, let's come up automatically.
The upper right-hand
I
corner.
shouldn't.
Thank you very much.
There we are. But that was so he was very keen on. He was very critical of Japanese house building. Felt it was far too fragile for the situation in which he found itself. In terms of climate, rain, and volcanic structure. He's very, very keen on use of concrete, and in fact, one of the buildings in Benton, in Lighthouse quarters, he made a concrete structure. People could come and visit and see what the advantage was.
Okay, so Geoff, Geoff, do you see on your screen you've got like an extra little drop-down screen? It starts with next.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's what he got involved in terms of Japan, and what I can. But when he came back to the UK, he did a report of the Lighthouse Hold and Lighthouse Initiative to the Institution of Civil Engineering, which he was a member of, and which he was very proud to be a member of. And they were impressed with the talk he gave on Japan lighthouses. The talk was entitled Japan Lights. And you can still read the full report if you want to. If you go on the internet, you find the document. And it was started off with towards the end. It was quite critical of some of the middle-ranking civil servants, as I said previously. And but he took that out, and the final presentation was worthy. They recognised by the institution. They gave him a prize for that. But then one of the other things which Japan related was that when he came back, he produced a map of Japan, which was, I think I've referred to it before, but it was a very large. The problem was it was very large scale and quite expensive, but it was very detailed, and but it was starting to be quite a lot of competition in terms of people visiting Japan and them requiring more portable maps. Therefore, his sale of his map, although it was very good quality, didn't sell very well.
Geoff, could you, just to sort of wind up, because we're
that's the map.
Could you sort of summarize what you think Brunton's achievement was in Japan?
In Japan itself was that he established a network of lighthouses, established the lighthouse service, which is important as well in terms of staffing of the lighthouses. So he not only established a network of lighthouses, 26 lighthouses initially, as I said, after he left, people added to these, or they were added to, but also that was basically his, and also the important thing is terms of town planning for Yokohama, established that, various aspects of that. And that was an important contribution in terms of that. I've made reference to the telegraph, initial telegraph, and with service was again the telegraph line from Yokohama to Tokyo was established, and he had an influence on the railway as well, although he wasn't actively involved himself, but it was quite critical for what he obviously from his railway background see the mistakes they were making. So that's basically what is
It's a fantastic achievement. Really,
yeah.
and
It's a
thank you.
shame I couldn't develop couldn't deliver
Don't worry,
the
don't
talk.
worry.
That's no
The
problem.
slides are really good. And I think there's quite a lot, there's some questions in the chat. The thing is that this is really a subject of great interest. So, Patricia, do you want to go through the chat to see if there are any questions to ask Geoff?
Actually, there's only one question, I think, and that's
Oh,
from,
is there?
yeah, really, because the discussion has been pretty animated. But it's from Lance, and he wonders um, what was the fuel used for the lighthouses?
Right. There was a paraffin. Basically, they used paraffin. He was employed subsequently, although I haven't made any reference to it here, although there is in what I originally planned for, with reference to the fact that he became a manager of one of the paraffin works in Scotland. A firm by the name of Young's, the people that mainly supplied the paraffin for the lighthouses, not only UK but and Japan, and other places, of course. But that was basically paraffin was the fuel that was more recently used by Brunton
Like a giant
for.
candle?
Pardon?
Paraffin, you mean like a giant candle?
There were cylinders of cut paraffin which provided. It was a liquid, paraffin is a liquid, therefore it supplied the candle. If it was a candle, as I said, it was powered by paraffin, therefore that was the paraffin burner.
Okay.
Yeah,
Geoff,
it's an early liquid fuel. It's like lamp oil almost.
Yes, that's right.
It's not.
That's
It
right.
doesn't solidify like a candle. They're wax plus paraffin is a candle. Uh, Perhaps Geoff could make the presentation available to Patricia, who could distribute it. There,
Yes, that's true. I'm really embarrassed by the fact that I wasn't able to
well,
make
there's something wrong. I don't think you're doing it.
nothing wrong. I
You
don't know.
never showed up. You never showed up once as a speaker in the Zoom, and I think that every other time I do Zoom all the time. I've never seen
Yeah.
that the presenter did not show up as a speaker. So there may be something wrong elsewhere.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the fact that Patricia said that most of I hadn't realized that the delivery was mainly by voice rather than by
okay.
Zoom. And therefore,
Geoff, I have a question for you. Can you hear me?
yeah, yeah.
So my question is not about Brunton himself, but one of his associates. So
Uh-huh.
Joseph Kobe Joe Dick, did you come across much information about Kobe Joe, or have you heard of Kobe Joe?
No, I haven't heard.
So he was one of Brunton's early lighthouse keepers. I think he accompanied Brunton while he was making the lights. Did you come across Joseph Dick at all?
He is mentioned in your footnote, number
Yes,
448.
yes. Thank you for pointing that out. Yes, indeed. And there's Semkins is another gentleman who wrote about his time with Brunton. He is a lighthouse keeper. And there was another gentleman whose archives have now been lost, unfortunately. His notes have now been lost. But in Calendar, where he ended up. No, I haven't come across Kobe Joe though.
An
Perhaps he didn't
interesting
write about
character. Yeah.
Perhaps he didn't write about his time there, although you suggest that he did. I haven't.
Okay, well, we've got a couple of last minute questions. One from Ian, a really interesting question. Which is Geoff's favorite lighthouse?
Oh, I don't know. I think it's what they call it. It's Monkey Island, which is near the entrance to. Oh no, I've never been there, but I mean,
Yokosuka.
it's interesting.
Oh,
But
Yokosuka. There is a Brunton lighthouse, but I don't think it's on Monkey Island. It's very close to it though. It's near Mabodi Kaigan. I know it. I've been there lots of times. It's a lovely spot, and it's at the mouth of Tokyo Bay.
really?
My favorite one is Tsunoshima in Shimonoseki City.
some of the there were a number of at the time that Brunton got involved in lighthouses. The French had been building had built 2 or 3 lighthouses quite near the entrance, because there was arsenal, a naval arsenal, which had been built. Yokohama, which south of Yokohama, and they built lighthouses to guard this arsenal. But they were brick built, and they were very fragile. In fact, they turned out to be the bricks. The thing about Brunton, he realizes that there needs to be lighthouses themselves needs to be reinforced. The weight of the lighthouses to withstand not only the force of the currents, but the wind and the whole thing needs to be changed. But where's the French built maybe a single line of bricks for an outer casing of the lighthouses. Where Brunton built lighthouses of brick, put in 2 layers of brick, whereas the French only put in 1 layer of brick.
So that's why Brunton's lighthouses are still standing.
But
ones aren't.
yeah, but when there was a earthquake or they're no longer original. The where the French built them, they don't exist anymore because they fell down.
I've seen the claim made that Brunton's lighthouses made Japan one of the safest coastlines for navigators, safer than the UK.
Yes, he got a number of, when he retired, from Japan, as it were, he got a number of very favourable comments from mariners complimenting on the lighthouses that he built and the way that they could use them very easily, or to get into navigate the coast. You're right. His work was very much appreciated by the
Patricia, sorry.
Yes.
Patricia, Sanjay has a good question, interesting question.
I was about to bring that up. Sanjay Raipal asks, do you think Glover had anything to do with Brunton being chosen?
No. Um,
No,
Next,
he wouldn't have done.
well, between you and I don't have tremendous amount of time for Glover, although he did make in certain areas, he was very helpful. But other areas he did, but he didn't get involved in. The problem was that why first he was important as far as Brunton, but the first lighthouses in Nagasaki and further south in further south in Kyushu. Yes. Right at the tip of.
Is it Sata? It's called Sata, isn't it? So Kagoshima. Yeah.
Yes, I think so.
Patricia, Alex has a question.
did I miss it? Okay, Alex, what's your question? Oh, yeah, I think I see it. Alex Byrne says, do you know if Brunton had any kind of relationship with Edmund Morey and the others involved in the construction of the first railway line in Japan? Of course, Morey died young in 1871.
Yeah, that's right.
Moved on to
very critical of Morale. That's an interesting subject in itself. The funding of the first railway, which was what's his name? Ratio, God. But anyway, the funding was very suspect. He was trying very much on the make, but the Morel was Edmund Morel was appointed engineer for the line between Yokohama and Tokyo. But although he was very engaged with his staff, or people that work on the line, didn't distance himself sufficiently. As a result, some of the one of the things was that he did in his favour was the fact that the railway sleepers weren't imported, but were native Japanese wood, so it saved a lot of money. But other respects, Brunton was very critical of the railway that was produced. For example, it was a lot of the bridges had to be pulled down and reinstated. For example, they weren't very substantially, and as a result, pardon.
You've got another. Can you click that drop-down screen that's overlaying your slide?
Oh yeah, sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay, we've got about another 5 minutes to go. Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, the railway line was what it was initially a single railway line. I mean, very short-sighted. Because you had an up line and down line, and as a result, but they did one line, and some of the rails were bent, and the whole thing's. His successor, Boyle, was were a railway engineer and very much, but it's very mysterious actually, because Morel, you need. It's quite a long story. He eventually, whoever is buried with him, it's a lady buried with him, and I don't know whether it's his wife or his mistress or whatever. And but he died very young, and he was too involved with helping. He didn't distance himself enough. That's what Brunton felt. That he didn't take a distant view and overall was too involved in the actual people that are involved in the railway. result, it took an extraordinary amount. It took over, it was 2 years before they actually, it was 22 miles between Tokyo and Yokohama at the time. It took them 2 years. And at the same time, the Americans were building railways, obviously, in their own country. They were doing half the time. And so as a result, it was a very elongated process. But they built it, and eventually it was, again, it was quite popular. But,
They got going with railways.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
They got going. The Japanese got going with railways. They might not have started very well, but they kept going.
The other mystery, it's a mystery to me, and I did quite a bit of research on it, was the fact it's a narrow gauge, Japanese railway system, as you know, is basically a narrow gauge railway. The only standard grade is the bullet train. It's just a normal width of line. So it was quite. Morel came from had worked in New Zealand on a narrow gauge railway, and it's debatable who made the decision to continue building narrow gauge railways. The Japanese had option that's past the 19th century to change over to a standard gauge, but by that stage they thought it involved enough in narrow gauge that it couldn't afford to change. But as a result, what we know today, nowadays they've been accidents because you can only go at a certain speed on a narrow gauge railway, and if you go on a faster speed, you crash. And there have been instances of that.
Okay. Maybe we can conclude with Ian Bruxton's question. Glover and Bruxton were both from Coast Guard families.
Yeah, it's interesting. Both Coast Guard families, but
I just wondered if the parents might have known each other, the fathers.
I don't know about the fathers. They did know Brunton and Glover did come across each other. Right. But Brunton was quite critical of. I think his attitude towards Glover, slightly antagonistic attitude, is because that Brunton was quite critical of the way that Glover treated his staff. We've talked about Brunton having a rather gruff manner. Well, Glover himself a problem in terms of running things and exploiting the staff, especially when he had a mine outside. What's the island outside Yokohama? Some of you will know. He owned that mine, and he treated staff very badly. Brunton was quite critical of people like Glover, Western employers, and Glover never. I could go on and on about Glover, but I mean, he wasn't. He called himself a Scottish samurai, towards the end of his life. And but in fact, he didn't. He did made a number of false claims, and Brunton did things which Glover. Well, he was very fortunate in becoming an arms dealer and dealing with the people that became Mitsubishi. He in the end he was.
Brunton's legacy is far, far, far superior to Glover's, but Glover's more famous in Japan because there's the garden. His garden.
Yes.
So
yes, that's the only thing.
Most Japanese have heard of Glover. They haven't heard of Brunton, I don't think.
Well, mainly Mitsubishi employees have heard of Glover. I mean, I don't know. There was a survey done, academic paper done a few years ago on people visiting Glover Gardens, and most of them people hadn't heard of, Glover, apart from people that were employees of Mitsubishi.
Although I think that there's a lot of Japanese who are not employees of Mitsubishi who do visit the Glover Garden.
Yeah, yes, of course,
Very popular.
Everybody visits it when they go to Nagasaki, I think. It's nice.
Okay. Yes, it is nice. It is nice, but all the way it's been arranged nowadays, in terms of bringing all bringing everything together. Yeah, but I don't know. I think I suppose I'm a bit biased insofar as that. Obviously Glover is more important up here, whereas in fact Brunton achieved a lot more for Japan. And
Brunton did massively more. I think all I'm saying is that nowadays Glover's name is known more in Japan than Brunton's is, but that it's not for a fair reason. It's only because Glover's Garden happens to be a tourist site in Nagasaki.
I see.
That's the only reason for it. It's not because
see.
And because he sold arms to Choshu and Satsuma, Robert.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that's not what he's famous for, is it? I mean, I don't think anyone knows that apart from us.
Really? Mm. Okay.
Well, no, I'm joking, but I don't think that's widely known in Japan.
Okay. Well, should we draw the evening to a close on that ambiguous note?
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
And if I can send you the
Please do.
the PowerPoint, and you can put it on.
Yeah.
Because I was going to cover a fair bit more, as you've probably seen from some of the slides. After Brunton, what he got involved in afterwards.
Okay.
Anyway.
All right. Well, thank you for that. Send me the slide. And thank you, everybody, for tipping in. All right.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. All the best.
Thank you, Geoff.